everyone, it's me, Carol from Practical Mystic. As always, welcome and thank you for joining me today as I finally get part 3 of our series on the Pythagorean triangle started. Thanks everyone for being patient. I had some technical difficulty, had to order new equipment, and of course it was back ordered. But here we are today with part 3, and what I am going to be discussing with you today in the Pythagorean triangle is basically threefold. I'm going to be talking about the general traits of numbers, the odd and even numbers and their interpretations, and lastly, numbers compatibilities. So, what I would like you to keep in mind as I proceed and give you this information is getting out your own, let's move these items here, so I can put this on your monitor in the center. You're able to take screenshots and read along with me. All right, we have already discovered that the Pythagorean triangle, which sometimes I'm going to reference as the Star of David, it is going to be your personal Star of David, has the 9 basic numbers of numerology put in somewhat of a template. That means each number has a designated area, and that's where the 9 numbers go. We went ahead and did an example as you followed me doing your own personal date of birth. That means the month, the day, and the year that you were born. You placed your individual numbers in the Star of David template. What I want you to keep in mind while I'm doing this video here with you today is get this out, look at it, and keep an eye out on what we considered a sub number. Even though they are very important, they are still very instrumental when we go ahead and interpret your particular Star of David is the life path number. Now that life path number, depending on what author you're going and book you're reading, is also known as a life lesson number, also known as a destiny number. This number is so important that I will be doing a single video just on that number in order to help set the stage and show how instrumental it is in interpreting the template and the numbers within it. Okay, so keep all that in mind. I'm going to take my example and put it aside. The other things I want you to keep in mind here, let me go back to this. How many of the numbers do you have in each of the designated areas? Here we have 2 1s, 1 2, we don't have a 3, we have 1 4, no 5, 1 6, 7, void of an 8 and a 9. And usually those of you listening are going to have a 1 and a 9 because you're born in that 19th century. Some of you will not. But keep in mind how many 4s, all of these numbers you have while we talk about the traits, the energy, the interpretation of the numbers, okay? Very good. So let's get started, and here are the general traits of numbers. And you can see that I really put them in different categories. And I'm just double checking, make sure you see this fully on your monitor. You do. All right, now the general traits of numbers I have in 5 different categories. Leadership and independence, emotional and caring, sexual, aggressive, intuitive, and psychic. Those 9 numbers are going to be under those particular categories once or numerous times. The leadership numbers, very independent numbers, are number 1, 4, 8, and 9. Number 1 is determined. Number 4 is steady. The number 8 personality wants to succeed, and number 9 is very talented. Now the emotional caring numbers are 2, 6, 7, and 9. 2 is very sympathetic. 6 is the peacemaker. 7 is very thoughtful. And 9 is generous. Sexual numbers, there are 3 of them. They are 3, 5, and 9. 3 is passionate. 5 is very physical. And 9 is affectionate. When we go to the aggressive numbers, they are 1, 5, and 8. 1 is a courageous, and don't look at aggressive as anything negative, but look at it as an action-oriented or a way of expressing action. And 1 is the courageous one. It's the pioneer. It's usually the leader. It'll be there. It'll stand up first and say, count me in. Number 5 is more dramatic in the way it expresses and does things. And number 8 is all about power. And then lastly, we have the intuitive and psychic numbers, and they are 2, 7, and 9. 7 is spiritual and mystical. We will talk about 7 in a great deal, and we will talk about number 9, the intuitive number, a great deal. I want you to also take note that the number 9 is in 4 out of the 5 categories. The only place the number 9 was not is in the aggressive because of its nature. Number 9 has all the numbers within it, and it is quite unique, and we will discuss that as I go forward with the next section, which is going to be on odd and even numbers. Okay, remember, keep in mind your personal template as you are hearing this information, and kind of take notes if you have 2 or 3 or more of these numbers in any one location of your template. Okay, what are the odd numbers? 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9, but 9 is really universal. It's dual. That's understandable throughout our studies of numerology and the 9 basic digits. And the odd numbers relate to thoughts and ideas. They are kind of male, active, and known as solar energy, the sun. Okay? They usually do like to be noticed and to shine brightly. The even numbers are 2, 4, 6, 8, but we have dual numbers, 6 and 8, which have both odd and even properties. Take note of that. How you can remember that is if you add 6 and 6 up, it's 12. 1 and 2 is 3, an odd number. Same is true for the number 8. 8 and 8 is 16. 6 and 1 is 7, an odd number. So if you have 6 and 8s, you have these energies, both the odd and even energies, the lunar and the male, because the even numbers relate to the practical realities and are sometimes passive in nature. They're going to step back. They're going to let the odd numbers take command, but they'll follow through, and they're more of the helpers, the encouragers, and they are female, receptive, and as I said earlier, excuse me, lunar. Okay, then I divided it even more into doers, feelers, and thinkers. Okay, it's the action doers are 1, 4, and 8s. The feelers are 3, 6, and 9s. And the thinkers are 2, 5, and 7s. Okay, what does all that mean? Well, the doers, of course, are action-oriented. How are they different in the way they take that action? The 1 does things for himself. Remember, 1 is independent. 1 is the ego. And when I talk about the ego, we are neutral. We're not saying it's good. We're not saying it's bad. It is your identity, that number 1. The number 4 concentrates on getting the work at hand done. And the number 8 likes to organize, manage, and what is getting done. So you can see, even though they're doers, they do something differently and basically work very well hand in hand together to fulfill the job description. Now we have the feelers. They're emotional in nature, and those numbers are 3, 6, and 9. Now the number 3 is more self-contained and self-expressive. The number 6 is more aware for the family and others than it is for the self, which relates more to number 3. And of course, the number 9 works with the universal and the collective. I would like to say the conscious and the unconscious, then with the family and self. So they're more universal in the way that they're feeling and emotional. Somewhat more detached too, able to detach and not make it so personal. That's the number 9. And then lastly, we're talking about our thinkers. They're the examiners and they like to analyze. And that is the number 2, the 5s, and the 7s. And the 2 thinks more in a social or dualistic mode. And when you see what I have in parentheses is what others are thinking and seeing both sides of a situation or an issue. They're the diplomats, but sometimes 2s are so in tuned, or let's say aware, even worried about what the other person is thinking, that they could become too sidetracked or too pleasing or too much of a conformist. So that number 2 is something we're gonna discuss and see how it has many gifts, but it also has things it has to be aware of that can get it off tilter and cause it to delay the best of its qualities. Okay, the number 5 is always curious, never staying long with one issue. And it gets bored, so it moves on. And the number 7 delves long and hard and deeply into the core of an issue. Now, me saying just that, if you have a 5 and a 7, you can see that they would balance each other out. But if you didn't have a 7 and you had 2 5s in your chart, you may be a rolling stone, or you may have a lot of irons in the fire and not get everything done. So are you seeing how this is working to understand how these numbers interplay with one another in your own personal chart? Okay, and then last, we're going to talk about compatibilities. And this is where I want you to really focus in on your life path number. If you're also looking at understanding someone you're comparing yourself to, or the personality traits. Now, you may have to kind of read this a couple times or go back to the video because it seems to be repetitive, but there is a psychological understanding of the compatibilities of how these numbers either work together or don't work together. Now, you remember we talked about the doers, the feelers, and the thinkers just a few seconds ago. And the doers will, and they're number 1, 4, and 8, they'll get along with other doers when doing something in common, having the same goal. Now, each must also allow the freedom for to do, and I'm sorry for that typo, that for he or she to do things without objection, rejection, or competition. So doers, same numbers, will get along only under those conditions. And then we get to the feelers, the 3s, 6s, and 9s, and they'll get along with other feelers, same numbers. As long as they're doing things that feel good together, or until their partner hurts the other's feelings, then all bets are off. And then thinkers, 2, 5s, and 7s get along with other thinkers as long as there is similarity in thought and or respect for their differences. That's a big one. Feelers do get along with doers as long as the feeler feels good about what the doer's doing. That's understandable. Doers will get along with the feelers when the doers experience support from the feelers, their emotions, their compassions. And the thinkers will get along with the doers as long as what the doers does is logical and makes sense to the thinker. So you can see that psychologically, these numbers have their own personal criteria, their own bend, their own reasoning, their own understanding and beliefs, energy, cosmic forces that interplay in how they go about working with other people or not working with other people. All right, we come to thinkers getting along with feelers when the feelings are consistent with logic and reasoning, and then feelers get along with thinkers if they feel good about the thinker's beliefs. All right, so what does all this mean? I try to generalize it. In general, two similar numbers, two odds or two evens, are not compatible. And there are some examples. We have two even numbers and they are static. When we have an odd and an even number, they are dynamic. And then of course, when you have two odd numbers, there's back to statics. So what can we view is that opposites attract. When two friendly numbers come together, they are not very productive. But when opposites come together, they make each other alert and actively, both people are on their best behaviors, I'd like to say. They work harder. There's productivity. Now, if we look at it this way, enemy numbers, okay, the opposites are actually friends. And friendly numbers are enemies only when they stop progress, activity, and personal growth. So, understanding these odd and even, the doers, the feelers, and the thinkers, as well as the general traits of these numbers and how they can be divided into the 5 categories of leaderships. They're emotional, sexual, aggressive, intuitive, and psychic. All of that is important to know, as well as your life path number and how that number may be in if you're a life path number 4, then you certainly have leadership and independence, even if you do not have a number 4 in your Star of David. So folks, play along with this. I welcome your thoughts and your comments. Again, thanks for being so patient. As you can see, I'm still having difficulties with my printers, but at least I'm able to use it. Thanks everyone for joining me. We'll talk again soon. Bye for now.